The night sky, once peaceful, shattered in an instant. An explosion lit up the darkness, followed by another, and then another. Earth, usually calm under the cover of its atmosphere, erupted into chaos. The soft hum of city lights and the distant whispers of the natural world were drowned by the sharp wail of air raid sirens. President Isabella Rhodes stood before the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the Situation Room, her eyes fixed on the flashing red lights of the emergency alerts. Her mind raced, but her body remained stone still. "Ma'am," General Mark Evans' voice broke through the thick silence. "We are under attack." The words hung in the air like a heavy weight, one that threatened to bring everything crashing down. Isabella's fingers tightened around the back of her chair as she turned to face the man who had always been her steady anchor. Evans was a seasoned military leader, tall and muscular, with a face weathered by years of service, but tonight, even he seemed unsettled. For all his experience, the unknowns of this attack were something neither of them had prepared for. "The Empire," she muttered barely above a whisper, as the realization sank in. The Empire's name was spoken in hushed tones across the galaxy. Known for its unmatched power and ruthless expansion, they had never bothered with Earth before. Until now. The screens in front of her flickered, showing images of the incoming fleet, countless ships blocking out the stars. They were too large, too numerous. Earth's defenses had never faced such a force. Panic started to creep into her chest, but she suppressed it with years of training. If she faltered now, the entire planet would follow suit. "We've been detected," Evans continued, his voice tense. "The first wave's already breached the atmosphere. We have no intel on their weapons yet." Isabella's eyes flickered to the map of Earth's orbital defense system. The grid was lighting up, but it was already too late. There were too many ships, too much firepower. "Evacuate the capital," she commanded, her voice sharp, pulling herself back into focus. "Get the civilian leaders to safe zones." Evans nodded grimly, his face set in stone. But before he could leave, a quiet voice interrupted from across the room. "Madam President," Ambassador Lyra Valen called out. "Is it too soon to send a message to the Empire? Perhaps we could." "No," Isabella cut her off, her voice rising with unspoken frustration. "We don't know what they want. We don't even know if they'll listen." She paused, her eyes narrowing on the screen once more. "We need to act. Right now." Valen's face tightened, but she didn't argue. The ambassador was diplomatic, always looking for a way to avoid bloodshed, but this wasn't the time for politics. Not anymore. As Evans stepped away to relay orders to the military, Isabella was left alone, her mind racing through countless possibilities. The Empire hadn't just come to negotiate, they'd come to conquer, to extinguish any semblance of rebellion. She knew they would never ask for permission to take Earth, but that didn't mean she would just hand it over. They had underestimated humanity, and that, Isabella knew, would be their first mistake. A sharp alarm interrupted her thoughts, the lights flickering as the first wave of destruction landed. Explosions erupted from across the planet's surface, an undeniable proof that humanity's fight had begun. The world would never be the same after tonight. Isabella's grip tightened around the armrest. "This is our home," she muttered. Her eyes hardened as she stared at the incoming fleet. "And we will defend it." She moved toward the holographic command table, her fingers brushing over the controls, inputting the orders that would send Earth's forces into action. There would be no negotiation, no surrender. The time for diplomacy was over. "General Evans," she called as she watched the movement of military ships begin to assemble, readying for combat. "Get our forces ready. We fight back. All the way." The tension in the room mounted, the weight of what she had just decided settling in. The first shots had been fired, and the world would know that humanity's spirit was not so easily extinguished. The battle for Earth had begun. President Isabella Rhodes paced the command center, her every step sharp and deliberate, echoing through the now quiet room. The initial barrage of explosions had left the world reeling, but that was only the beginning. The Empire's fleet hovered ominously above Earth, its shadow stretching across the sky like a predator waiting for its prey to make the first move. General Mark Evans stood at the far side of the room, his face grim as he reviewed the latest intelligence. The communications grid was still intact, but it wouldn't be for long. Each passing moment brought the Empire's forces closer to overwhelming Earth's defenses. "They've already taken out our orbital stations," Evans said, not bothering to hide the worry in his voice. "We're blind up there. And their weapons—" "I know," Isabella interrupted, her voice steady but fierce. "But we have a chance. We've trained for this." Evans looked at her sharply, a mixture of disbelief and admiration in his gaze. The president's calmness in the face of such an immense threat was unnerving, but also inspiring. He had seen countless leaders crumble under pressure, but Isabella Rhodes stood like a rock in the middle of the storm. "Are we ready?" she asked, her eyes locking with his. "We're about to find out, General." The tactical map on the screen displayed Earth's last-ditch defense forces, scrambling to intercept the Empire's relentless onslaught. The military had mobilized quickly, but it wasn't enough. The fleet overhead was massive, unprecedented in its scale, and its weapons were far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. "We're not ready," Evans admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "Not completely. But we'll fight. We'll hold as long as we can." Isabella's jaw tightened. She knew the truth. Earth was outmatched, but humanity's greatest strength had never been in numbers or technology. It had always been in their will to survive. She wasn't about to let that spirit die without a fight. "Get me aligned to the fleet," she said, turning toward the communications officer. Seconds later, the screen flickered to life, showing the commander of Earth's defense forces, Admiral Helen Brooks. The woman's face was drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes were filled with the same resolve that burned within Isabella. "Ma'am," Admiral Brooks said, her voice hoarse from hours of radio traffic, "the fleet is moving to intercept, but we're severely outgunned. I'm not sure how much longer we can hold them off." "We're not backing down, Admiral," Isabella replied, her tone unwavering. "I need you to keep pushing. We're in this together, all the way." The Admiral's eyes narrowed, a flicker of determination crossing her features. "Understood, ma'am. We'll keep them occupied as long as we can." "Good," Isabella said. "Now, prepare for the counter-strike. We may not win, but we can make them regret underestimating us." The line went silent as the Admiral relayed orders to her fleet, and for a brief moment, the weight of the situation settled over the room. Every person here knew what was at stake, not just Earth's survival, but the very concept of resistance itself. If the Empire won, humanity would be nothing more than a footnote in the history of a galaxy that had once believed it was invincible. Isabella turned back to the command table, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. She input coordinates, directing the last remaining fleets to their positions, coordinating with ground forces, and preparing for a counteroffensive. It was a gamble, a desperate move, but it was humanity's only hope. "We've got incoming," Evans said, his voice low. "The Empire's not waiting for us to finish our preparations. They're launching a full-scale attack." The ground beneath them trembled as a new round of explosions shook the city. The Empire's ships had begun their descent, firing their devastating energy weapons at Earth's defenses. Buildings crumbled, and the air was thick with smoke as the atmosphere itself seemed to rebel against the invasion. Isabella's eyes burned with fury as she stared at the screen. She wouldn't let Earth fall without a fight, not while she still drew breath. "Hold the line," she muttered to herself, her voice steady, but with a fire that could not be ignored. "Hold it for as long as it takes." A series of blips appeared on the tactical map, signaling the arrival of Earth's last-ditch fighters. They were outnumbered, under-equipped, and facing an enemy with technology far beyond their own, but they were human. And that was something the Empire could never fully understand. "Send them in," Isabella ordered, her voice filled with conviction. "We may not have a chance to win, but we will make them bleed." As the fighters roared into the atmosphere, the first wave of humanity's defense came into direct contact with the Empire's forces. The skies were filled with trails of light as the two sides clashed. Explosions rippled across the sky, a chaotic dance of light and destruction. The fight had only just begun, but there was no turning back now. And for the first time since the invasion began, Isabella felt something stir deep inside her, something that had lain dormant for too long. It was hope. The kind that only a species on the brink of extinction could summon. The kind that would see humanity through the darkest of days. The battle raged across Earth's skies, the atmosphere crackling with the intensity of combat. Fires from the capital cities below reflected off the smoke-filled air, as Earth's last defenses clashed against the Empire's overwhelming power. President Isabella Rhodes stood at the front of the command center, her gaze unwavering as she monitored the fleet's engagement. The screens flickered, displaying reports from scattered outposts and battlefronts, but the numbers were grim. Earth's forces were being pushed back, rapidly. "We've lost contact with Sector 9. General Mark Evans's voice cut through the chaos, his tone strained. "The Empire's been deploying ground troops." His knuckles were white as he gripped the tactical console. "They're storming cities now." Isabella didn't flinch. "We'll hold the line here," she said, turning to face him. Her calm demeanor was not out of arrogance, but necessity. Panic would do nothing to stop the Empire. "Continue to deploy what we have left. And make sure our people know we are not giving up." Evans nodded, though the uncertainty in his eyes betrayed him. "Yes, ma'am. I'll relay the orders." As the general hurried to carry out her command, Isabella's thoughts drifted momentarily to the people of Earth, the families, the children, those who hadn't even begun to fathom the scale of what was happening. And then, a question whispered through her mind: would it be enough? In that instant, a transmission came through. The voice was distorted by static, but Isabella recognized the tone instantly. "This is Admiral Brooks," the woman said, her voice crackling. "We've sustained heavy damage. The fleet's been decimated. I'm ordering a full retreat." Isabella's chest tightened. "Retreat? You're leaving Earth?" She stepped closer to the console, her pulse quickening. "It's not that simple," Admiral Brooks replied, her voice full of grim resolve. "The Empire's new warships, they're too powerful. We're being wiped out. I'm pulling back the survivors. It's the only option." The President took a deep breath. Her mind raced through scenarios. The military was failing. Earth's government was on the brink. The population had no choice but to endure, but at what cost? "Do what you must, Admiral," Isabella said at last, her voice firm. "But I will not surrender. Earth will never surrender." There was a moment of silence on the line before Brooks responded. "Understood, ma'am. We'll keep fighting." "Keep fighting," Isabella echoed quietly to herself. The words were a mantra, a promise. But deep down, she knew it was getting harder to believe. The room was eerily quiet after the transmission ended. Her staff and the officers around her were working with swift efficiency, though their faces were painted with the exhaustion of those who knew the odds were slipping further from their favor. Yet, their unwavering determination was palpable. The humans of Earth were not easily broken. But the Empire's attack was not just a war, it was an invasion of everything they knew. Earth had never faced such an enemy, one so advanced, so ruthless. It wasn't just weapons or technology they had to contend with. It was the very notion that their home, their way of life, was considered insignificant in the vastness of the galaxy. And it made them fight harder. "Ma'am," Evans interrupted, his voice tinged with an edge of urgency. "There's a new transmission. It's from the Resistance." Isabella's brow furrowed. The Resistance? Most of the insurgents had scattered, their efforts futile against the Empire's might. To hear they were still active was unexpected, and perhaps a sign of desperation. "Put it through," she ordered. The screen flickered and stabilized, revealing the image of a ragged man, his face covered in dust and grime. He was clearly struggling to stay connected, but there was no mistaking the fire in his eyes. "President Rhodes," the man said, his voice hoarse but determined, "we've got intel. The Empire's deployed a new kind of weapon. We're talking planetary-scale annihilation. They're preparing to use it soon." Isabella's breath caught in her throat. She'd heard rumors of such a weapon, something that could wipe out entire civilizations in a single sweep. But hearing it from the Resistance, this changed everything. Where? She demanded. Where are they targeting? The man hesitated. Right here, ma'am. They've set their sights on Earth's core. Once they hit it, the planet will implode. We're talking about total destruction. The news hit like a hammer. The unthinkable had become a reality. If the Empire succeeded in using this weapon, Earth would be no more than a memory in the galaxy. Get us that intel, Isabella ordered, her voice ice-cold with determination. And rally the forces. We may be outmatched, but we will stop them. I swear it. The screen blinked, and the Resistance leader's face vanished. But the words lingered like a dark cloud, hanging over Isabella's thoughts. Evans approached her, the tension thick between them. What's our next move, ma'am? We're running out of time. Her gaze hardened as she stared out the window at the burning horizon. We fight. We do what humans do best, we fight for survival. If this is the end, we'll make sure the Empire knows who they're dealing with. Suddenly, a low rumble shook the building. An alert sounded, more explosions, this time closer than ever. We've got incoming, an officer called out. Isabella straightened, her back rigid with resolve. Prepare for the worst, she said. And when the Empire comes knocking, make sure they understand one thing. We are humanity. And we do not yield. The battle for Earth had only just begun, but the stakes had never been higher. The survival of the planet, and of its people, depended on the strength of their resistance. There was no turning back now. The early morning light broke through the clouds, casting an eerie, blood-red glow over the battlefield. President Isabella Rhodes stood at the front lines, her face hardened by the sight of what was once a thriving metropolis, now reduced to rubble. This was no longer a war. It was humanity's final stand. Behind her, the remnants of Earth's military forces rallied. They were outgunned, outmanned, and facing an enemy that had no mercy. Yet something in the air had shifted, an unspoken resolve had taken root in the hearts of the soldiers. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the legacy of the human race. Isabella took a deep breath, her hand clenched around the hilt of her blade. It was a symbol, a reminder that humanity had once been masters of their own destiny. And she would not let that slip away without a fight. She glanced over at General Mark Evans, who had been by her side through the worst of the conflict. His eyes, bloodshot from sleepless nights, still held a spark of determination. How long do we have? Isabella asked, her voice steady despite the weight pressing on her chest. Evans looked at the monitors in front of him, a line of sweat trickling down his temple. An hour at most. The Empire's forces are closing in from the north. They've deployed ground units. Our defenses won't hold for long. Isabella nodded, her mind racing. They couldn't afford to retreat. Earth's last hope lay in the Resistance's final gambit, their one chance to destroy the Empire's superweapon. If they didn't act now, all would be lost. Have you made contact with the Resistance? She asked, turning back to him. Evans nodded grimly. We've secured the intel. They're preparing to strike, but we're still waiting on the location of the Empire's command ship. We can't hit them without it. Then we find it. Now. Isabella's voice was cold and decisive. The general hesitated, clearly concerned about the lack of time, but he didn't argue. Yes, ma'am. As they made their way toward the command center, the air grew heavier, as though even the planet itself knew the weight of the decision hanging over them. Every step was laden with the gravity of what might come. Inside the command center, Isabella was met with a rush of data. Alerts and notifications flashed across the screens, but she was fixated on the information that could change everything. The location of the Empire's flagship appeared on a map of the region, just within reach. But time was not on their side. The next hour could be the last. Evans leaned over her shoulder. We don't have much longer. Isabella's jaw tightened. I know. A voice came through the comm system, cutting through the tension like a knife. This is Resistance leader Zara Talon. We have located the flagship. We're ready to move. Relief, like a wave, washed over Isabella. Zara had led the underground forces since the beginning, her network of spies and saboteurs playing a crucial role in disrupting the Empire's plans. But now, the Resistance's most daring operation was about to unfold. We'll give you cover, Isabella said. Prepare the assault teams. We're hitting the Empire hard. Zara's voice crackled through the line. Understood. We move out in 5. General, assemble our forces, Isabella ordered, her mind already on the coming battle. If we're going to do this, we need every soldier on the front line. Evans was already moving, barking orders to the remaining troops, a sense of purpose settling over him. Isabella could feel the atmosphere in the command center shift, the hope that had been dwindling now igniting into something fierce. Humans had always been fighters. They weren't going to let an alien empire snuff out their existence without a fight. The countdown began. The ground shook with the distant rumble of explosions, as Earth's final resistance forces prepared for their most dangerous mission yet. The flagship was close. They had only one shot. Isabella's eyes swept across the room, landing on each of her remaining commanders. They all had their doubts, their fears, but they shared one common resolve: do or die. She turned her attention to the map on the screen, tracking the path of the enemy fleet. The Empire's forces were overwhelming, their ships large enough to blot out the sky. But in the center of it all was their flagship, the heart of their power. And if they destroyed it, the Empire would crumble. Zara's voice crackled again over the comms. We're in position. Ready when you are, Rhodes. Isabella's pulse quickened. The time had come. Earth's fate rested in the hands of these brave men and women who had nothing left to lose but everything to fight for. She glanced once more at the battlefield before her, the shattered remnants of Earth's cities, the faces of the people who had survived this long. She could feel the weight of every sacrifice made to get to this moment. It was all or nothing. Let's show them what humanity is made of, Isabella said, her voice steady, unwavering. The battle for Earth's survival had begun in earnest, but the real fight, the fight that would decide everything, was about to unfold.